You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
I wasn't planning on it. I nod and say nothing. Michael doesn't even bother hiding his smirk. They know what their mother is going to do. Then Michael pipes up. I'm gonna go to a party at Josh's tonight, so I won't be back either. He doesn't even bother asking anymore. He just tells me. She looks up alarmed. Nancy's head goes further down towards her bowl. He just smiles at me, begging me to do something about it. I lock eyes with him for what seems like hours before I finally break away. He and his mother get a nice snort out of this. I can't even control my own son. With that, Michael gets up from the table, leaving his dishes for me as I watch him walk to his brand new Mustang and take off for school. Or wherever he goes during the day. Teachers have given up calling me because they know I can't do anything and his mom doesn't care. He won't even drop Nancy off at the middle school right next to the high school. She has to ride the bus. He turns on the engine and roars out of the driveway, squealing his tires around the sharp bend out of the cul-de-sac. With Michael gone, Susan sees no more reason to continue the charade with Nancy and I. She gets up and heads for the bedroom to get ready for her day. Her day of Netflix until she goes out with her girlfriends, most likely to end in some 20-something's apartment. After the regulars are through, I decide to close early. There's no one coming in after 2. The bonus is I can pick up Nancy from school. Our days out, although rare, always seem to brighten her mood. I send her a text telling her to wait for me in the usual spot and head out. Okay, she meekly replies. Okay. Well, okay isn't good. I need you to be great. I try the classic dad routine, hoping to lift her spirits. It fails. Her eyes widen. Adventure Park. Adventure Park is the run-down amusement park on the outskirts of our town. It's no Six Flags, but Nancy loves it and we haven't made the drive out there in months. Before hopping on the freeway, I realize I forgot my wallet on the dresser. I quickly turn around and race home. I want to make the most of my time with Nancy. They look at me and she laughs. So you finally caught me. You had to have known. I said, get out. Let me get dressed, I'm going out tonight anyway. At this she laughs even harder. Nude, in my bed with a stranger, she laughs at me. Michael speaks first. Travis is having a get-together tonight. I was wondering if I could go. I can barely conceal my amusement. Oh, so you ask now? I inquire. With that, Susan speaks up. Not sure if you remember, but tonight is my sorority's reunion downtown. You wouldn't mind if I went, do you? I look at her with a smile. No, of course not. You two enjoy yourselves tonight. They exchange cautious glances. But Michael, you'll need to pick your mom up from the bars tonight. Nancy and I are going out of town for the weekend, and Susan, your car needs to go into the shop before we leave. Enough of this adventure park nonsense, I say, we're gonna go ride some real coasters.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
My Daughter's Coming Home, by Theod Catlety. When I first saw I was getting a call from an unknown number, I thought it was another sales call. I only answered it on the off chance it was from my friend Irma. I knew she'd gotten a new phone number. It was quiet except for someone breathing on the other end. I frowned but tried again. Hello, is someone there? Or is this another robot telling me I've won a cruise? I heard a quiet laugh, followed by a sob. I was shaking. I couldn't believe it. Kendra, you're okay. Where have you been? It's been 8 years, I thought. I thought you were Dash. I ran away. Ended up in California, somehow. Kendra laughed again. You wouldn't believe what kind of shit I've been up to. Pardon my language. But my God, I've wanted to come back for so long. I just didn't know how, you know. Just waiting for the bus to take me that last leg. I actually should be back tonight. You haven't moved, have you? I couldn't stop myself from sobbing. I was still trying to absorb that my daughter was alive. No. Your dad wanted to, but I couldn't. Just in case you ever came back, what have you been even doing? I made you memorize it for a reason, baby girl. I wiped away the tears and suddenly my soul felt lighter than it had in years. Tell me everything. I want to hear it all. Nah, I think I'll eat on the way. See you soon. I love you, Mom. Then I got up and began cleaning the house. I turned on the Beach Boys as I dusted off all the surfaces, did all the dishes. I hadn't felt this free in so long. I only paused for a moment before I headed into Kendra's bedroom. She's alive, Greg. I laughed and shook her head. I just wanted to get the house ready. I'll get dinner started in an hour dash. He took it and I saw his eyes widen before he sneered. This is a joke. A sick joke. Someone's making fun of you. He lifted back up the phone. This could be anyone. It's been 8 years. What took her so long to call? I can tell you why, because it's not Kendra. My high from earlier crashed. I was on the phone with her. I'm not an idiot, it was her Dash. Greg. I tried taking my phone back but he waved me off. The phone rung twice before Kendra answered. Yeah, Mom. Something come up? She asked. I could hear the sounds of the bus in the background. Greg went dead silent. I stared at my husband. What is she talking about? I asked. I shook but I waited for that picture to pop up. That's all Greg got out before all I saw was red. I grabbed the lamp off of Kendra's desk. Greg spun around just in time to have it collide with his head. The lamp shattered and Greg dropped to the ground, the phone landing among the glass fragments. Mom. Mom, are you okay? Jesus Christ, Mom, did you kill him? Kendra whistled. Good, because I called dibs. Just throw him in the basement till I get there, bus is pulling into town now. I'll be home in about half an hour. I love you. She hung up and I was alone with my unconscious husband. But he's staying there so he doesn't miss our daughter coming home.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I'm going to put it right out there and tell you that it was haunted. You think I'm joking, nuts, or lying, but you have no idea. Haunted prisons aren't anything like you imagine. Those places that advertise themselves and give people tours are sick jokes compared to the real thing. It got so bad that you can actually look up GCG's official filings for Chapter 11. That shit put them out of business on their very first prison, and right there on the briefs, using an early statute of North Dakota law from 1857 to file an insurance claim, it says, site of Pembina Prison confirmed by Governor's Office and 2 notary publics witnessing in person to be afflicted by the supernatural such that continued business is impossible. It wasn't the first time the prison was closed for that reason either, but leeches kept buying it and reopening it hoping to make a buck off the common man. And I was shoved into that hellhole without knowing the history even a single bit. Don't get me wrong. The building itself wasn't so bad, especially for something straight out of 1853. It was a big stone cube that was squat, heavy, and cramped, but way less sealed off than modern prisons. We could see a lot of the cells around us, there was only one main hallway per floor, and we were close enough to pass things between the bars and have some real human interaction. It could have been worse. There were 5 floors and capacity for 500 prisoners. When I first got there, I had a bunch of cellmates, and I heard there were 2,000 guys locked up, and I believed it, but that soon changed. The prisoners were talking quietly between the cells and loudly between the floors through various whispers and shouts, but the most we could figure out was that something on the first floor had made them all quit in protest. Sure, must have been the crazies screaming like that during the night, right? Except none of us could get any word from the bottom floor. It was dead silent down there. The guys on the second called out for hours, someone was down there, they said, because they could hear shuffling footsteps walking around at random every so often, but whoever it was never said a single word. That was the first time Dante mentioned the crazy stories from the first floor. He muttered that he hoped none of that was true, but when I asked about it, he just shook his head. Nothing, man. None of it ever made sense. We were a little worried as the day wore on and nobody came to let us out for breakfast, and then nobody came to let us out for lunch. The time we usually got to spend outside in the yard came and went, and people began getting restless. In the cell to our left, Dante's friend began telling guys to pass the word that we should all calm down and start sharing any food we had holed away. They've denied meals and yard time for a day or 2 before, he told me. What about the prisoners on the first floor? Will asked. We could still hear them shuffling around down there. We looked on the way out to the yard, but we couldn't see anyone. Transferred? The hell's that mean? It means Dossier took them back. Returned to state custody since the company couldn't handle them. But these new guys didn't even have the skills to handle us. There were half as many guards as before and they didn't know the routines or who the dangerous ones were among us. As a result, they were distant, scared, and forceful. All except one guy. Kellen. When the new shift came in, they were surprised and confused, and Kellen came by to ask what had happened. We told him what we knew, but he'd shown up and found open gates and an empty second floor. There was no indication what had happened, but he promised to check with corporate and figure out if the absent prisoners had all been rapidly transferred again. Dante gripped the bars and made sure Kellen was looking at him. Please find out who the hell is walking around down there at night. Dante reached through the bars and grabbed his uniform, something which usually got us a beating. Hear me. Do not go in there by yourself. Stay in the stairwell unless someone's with you. God. Let us out." We weren't as scared when it was happening because we'd lived through it twice before, but, this time, the long-term fear was much deeper. Now we knew for sure that it was going to happen again, and any prisoners that had the means began lawyering up and doing everything they could to transfer to other prisons, even if it meant worse conditions. The problem was, the North Dakota prison system was already overflowing, which was the whole reason GCG got started in the first place, so every guy that got out meant it was that much harder for the rest of us. Both of our cellmates transferred, giving us more space, so that was nice, but it was small consolation. Beside us at the bars, Will asked, "What's the word?" Kellen seemed grim. "Lot of bullshit out there, but this place is mentioned a lot. It's been closed before, but I keep getting stonewalled when I ask for the historical documents. Thing is, I don't think the prison itself is the problem. Get this." He pulled out a notepad for reference. 2 Canadian priests, Fathers Norbert Preventure and Xavier Dumoulin, visited Pembina in 1818, before it was even an official township. That was back when the Hudson's Bay Company was big around these parts. That's how long ago it was. Pembina was the biggest town in North Dakota then, so the trading post was full, so the priests chose to sleep outside by where the Pembina River meets the Red River. The folk tale has it that a vision of a rotting woman came in the night and stole Preventure's life. The 2 men bartered with her to split the remaining life between them, consigning both to live only 35 more years instead of the 70 Xavier had left. Xavier got an extra month and 20 days as a gift from his friend for his sacrifice. He paused, as if we might guess the obvious outcome. They both died 35 years later. Dante snorted. "It's true, dude," Kellen insisted. "The dates of death are right there on Wikipedia. But get this. 35 years after 1818 made their death year 1853, the year this prison was built. And the place they camped that night? By the meeting of the rivers?" He was dead serious. "I think there's some shit here. Ancient shit. I asked a guy I know, he's got Chippewa relatives over at Turtle Mountain. They know the history of the Red River better than anyone else. He said his uncle told him to never sleep at the meeting of the Red River and the Pembina River. He said something lives here, under the ground, and awakens with the changing of the seasons." He just looked at the floor. "What I mean is, I do hope you get out before it comes." It wasn't too much after that we heard GCG was going under. The mad rush of transfers had pissed off the state and lost the company a vital contract for a second location, and investors had pulled out or something. The number of guards was cut, then slashed, and Kellen took a pay hit to stay on as the only guy on the day shift. "It's cool," Will told him. "You got a kid at home. Don't be here for it." On Monday night, nothing happened. The 2 guys down below occasionally shouted up to us that everything was clear. On Tuesday night, nothing happened. The strain was growing though, and we could sometimes hear them breathing rapidly down there. I could only imagine the adrenaline rushing through them every minute until dawn. "It's just your imagination," Dante whispered. None of us were willing to speak louder than that. On Thursday night, that heartbeat became a feeling of footsteps approaching from a great distance. Friday night. That was the night it would happen. All day, the 2 guys on 4th pulled and clanged on their bars, begging to be let out. Kellen was torn. After 2 hours of listening to that pleading, he came up with an idea, and transferred both of them up to our floor. "If nobody's on 4, he said happily. "Then we'll all be safe, right?" Will demanded, "What's happening? Tell us." "Red. It's red." We stared down the hallway at the night guard, who stood listening with fear. The man who'd been communicating with us began incoherently raging with fear against his bars. Then, strangely, he stopped. Shut up. It'll see you. Distract it. Hit your bars. The sound of clanging echoed up the stairwell. Will screamed at him, snap out of it. The other guards and prisoners got away, you can too. Whatever it is, it won't follow you if you let them out and leave. I shouted, they're gonna die down there. The other prisoner wasn't talking for some reason. We could hear his gasping terror, but that, too, went quiet. And just like that, we were alone again. The formerly crowded prison now felt terrifyingly large and empty with only 20 of us and no guards. That night, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from down below. I counted time as best I could, 40 minutes, then someone took 3 steps out of a cell and into the hallway, an hour and 6 minutes, someone ran 10 steps along the hallway and stopped abruptly. 28 minutes, the footsteps approached the stairwell, but then turned into a cell and went silent. Thing was, whoever it was sounded barefoot, and the starting and stopping locations did not match. Where they ended was often nowhere near where they began again later. By the time dawn came, we were scared into motionless terrified silence, and it took Kellen's arrival for us to begin stirring again. With GCG in bankruptcy court, we no longer had a night guard at all. If it came for us, there would be nobody to let us out of our cells like everyone else. We hardly talked. We hardly ate. They didn't know there were only 3 of us left. Nobody knew. That was worse than nobody knowing. It turned out, nobody cared. 2. There was nobody higher up at GCG following the situation, and Kellen couldn't get anybody on the phone. Payroll, meaning, just his paycheck, was being handled by a third-party disbursement company that couldn't answer questions about ongoing proceedings. The week approached. When dawn came, we sighed and began moving again. Dante asked, "You get out Friday?" I nodded. If things went like before, I would be released the day of. As long as I left before sundown, I would be all right. It had come a day earlier in the week than the last time. Dante just shook his head angrily. I wasn't going to get out in time. On Wednesday night, the heartbeat became the sound of footsteps approaching from some unfathomable distance. I think I stood at the bars of our cell that entire day, fingers wrapped around metal with force to match the tension in the air and in our minds. This couldn't happen. This wouldn't happen. My lawyer would walk in and tell me he'd gotten the judge's unfair addition of an extra day removed. One day. One goddamn day. Even if I'd spent the whole year in this prison, one day still meant life or death. Let me out. Let me the hell out. For God's sake. But nobody cared, and nobody would listen. But I can't give you a satisfying end to this story. The disbursement company fired Kellen and changed the locks on the property. According to their paperwork, all the prisoners had been moved, and they thought he'd been getting paid for guarding an empty prison. They left us in there for 11 days before the error was found, which meant 11 nights with that thing. For 11 days, we starved. For 11 nights, we sat absolutely still, not daring to move or breathe or even look left or right. It knew where we were, generally, it stood right outside our cells for hours, and sometimes walked right through the bars and grasped at the beds around us, daring us to make even the slightest motion. No one cares. I'd like to tell you that Kellen actually existed. I'd like to tell you we had a friend among the guards, and that it wasn't all bad. I'd like to tell you I wasn't traumatized by the hell I went through being left to rot and left to die as nothing more than a number on some corporation's books. But no one cares. Blog, FB, TW.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Every year on Christmas Eve my parents drug us. I found out why, by Catan Thecabord. Yeah. You read that right. Maybe you even read my post last year. I was pretty panicked when I wrote it, so it was short, but it was real. It's pretty simple for how crazy it all sounds. Every year on Christmas Eve for as long as I can remember my parents drug us with sleeping pills. Something about not being awake when Santa comes. We have a whole schedule the family keeps to. Dinner at 5, at 6 we put on our pajamas and watch that shitty movie It's a Wonderful Life, and yeah, the PJs match, and then at 8:30 we all use our last bit of eggnog to wash down the pills. They're strong. My sister's out in probably 15 minutes. I take a little longer but I'm always asleep by 9. Then we wake up the next morning, groggy but okay, and Mom gushes about everything Santa left under the tree. Because we're good. It's all bullshit. Last year, I'd finally had enough. I got sick of the lies. Sick of the matching pajamas, sick of playing pretend that we were having the perfect family Christmas. I wanted to know why my parents drug us. I had to know why. So when Mom handed me that little white pill I hid it under my tongue and spat it in the toilet. Then I went to bed and pretended to be asleep. I listened until I heard Mom snoring to get up and look around. I wasn't surprised to see the tree stuffed with gifts already, Santa who, but that was it. I wasn't finding any secrets. Nothing unusual or weird, until I saw them. I was reading the credit card statement, so sue me, they drug us, when I saw movement outside. We always have a white Christmas, and by that time the street was dead quiet, so when I saw something rush by the window, it startled me. I just about opened the front door to go look when I saw them. Lots of them. Landing on the roofs one by one and crawling into the chimneys of every house. I don't even know how to properly describe them. Is that what PTSD does? Stops you from remembering things? Because I must have PTSD. I know I have it. I have to have it. I crouched by the couch, hiding behind the curtains and watching these giant red spidery things as they skittered across the rooftops. They'd reach a chimney and one by one hop in the air, tuck their legs into a line beneath them and shoot down the chimney. They'd be gone for a few minutes and then shoot back out. Mostly with nothing. Sometimes with random items or decorations. For one brief stupid second I thought that they were maybe some fucked up version of Santa's elves until I heard the most god-awful sound. The sound that still haunts my every waking moment. Agonized screams of pure terror. Wailing. Crunching. Grinding. The sound of someone's body being forced up the chimney. Human bodies don't fit in chimneys. Not like that. I watched in horror as the Smith's daughter Maggie came up the chimney, pulled by two of those freaks of nature. By the time they pulled her out she'd stopped screaming. I don't think she was alive by then. I hope she wasn't. Her body wasn't right. It was like a tube of toothpaste that had popped. I sat there in shock, watching the Smith's roof turning pink before I felt the gravity of what I'd just seen bury me. Suddenly I knew why my parents drugged us, and I needed to get to sleep, fast. I ran straight for the bathroom and poured out 3 of those little white sleeping pills, then dove into my bed. I pulled the covers over my head and started chewing. Have you ever tried to chew pills? They're not supposed to be chewed. They taste like shit. I just about threw up twice. It didn't help that I could hear those things getting closer. You know those movies about Santa and his reindeer? About the bells and the hooves? That's them. There's no reindeer. That horrible clicking comes from them, and I knew what they did to people who weren't sleeping. And number X200B. Until it wasn't. We'd opened stockings and exchanged gifts and were gorging ourselves on fresh cinnamon buns and eggs Benedict when I made the mistake of glancing outside. By that point I'd sort of convinced myself that I just had a crazy dream. I'd snuck off to smoke pot with one of my friends early Christmas Eve, so I figured maybe it had mixed badly with the sleeping pill. But the moment I looked outside my eyes were drawn to the Smith's house, and that pink patch on top. Suddenly I couldn't swallow and I drank a whole glass of milk just trying to choke down my food. It hadn't been a dream. So where were the cops? Sure, I'd gotten up late, but a kid goes missing on Christmas Eve, you'd assume that the police would be crawling the neighborhood all day. I'd been staring out the window, feeling the pit in my stomach grow heavier and heavier when my dad jolted me to reality. I looked at him and nodded, trying to take another bite for show. "Hey, have you seen the Smiths?" I asked suddenly, wondering if maybe they just hadn't wanted to spoil the mood. I watched my parents take a sharp but quick glance at each other before he shook his head and smiled. "Not yet. I'll let you know if I see Maggie outside though," he teased with a wink, grabbing my shoulder and giving it a squeeze as he left the table. Mom gave me a kind smile and poured me another glass of milk. I probably sat there for another hour before I finally gave up and went to help my sister set up her new doll house. I needed the distraction. I couldn't tell anyone. How do you talk about shit like this? I sounded crazy in middle school when I tried to ask my friends about being drugged on Christmas Eve. I'd definitely get locked up if I talked about giant red spiders taking people in the night. But I was losing my mind. We'd had Thanksgiving. Halloween was coming and the colder it got, the more anxious I got. The stores were already running clearance on costumes and jack-o'-lanterns to make room for ornaments. The first signs of Christmas were already seeping in, and I was absolutely without a doubt, terrified for my life. That's when my friends called me to hang out. It might sound stupid, but my friends and I have a code we use when things are bad and we need to talk. We definitely drifted apart in high school, none of us really hung out that much together anymore, but none of us had ever backed out when someone said they needed to smoke. I was exhausted, but I figured the worst I'd get was some weed out of it. Besides, when the bat signal goes up, you gotta answer it. And number X200B. We're really worried about you, Ella added gently, putting a hand on my arm. Don't be. People think you're gonna shoot up the school. I sat on the stump, fidgeting and staring at the ground until I was high enough to be brave enough to try and tell them the truth. What did I have to lose? They thought I was crazy anyways. You guys remember in middle school, when I talked about magic pills? They weren't magic pills, they were sleeping pills. Ever since I can remember, my parents have drugged me and my sister on Christmas Eve. I thought it was normal. They told me they were magic pills to make sure we were all asleep so that Santa, I stopped and groaned, rubbing my face and trying not to wuss out. So that Santa would come. Because he doesn't come when you're awake. I saw Greg clamp a hand over his mouth, his shoulders shaking. Ella shot him a dirty look and elbowed him hard, then smiled at me. Fuck, this is stupid. Never mind. No. No. No, it's not. Keep going. Come on, we want to hear. I took a deep breath in and closed my eyes. I hated closing my eyes. If I closed my eyes and thought about it, I could see it all happening again. I could hear Maggie's screams again. What? How'd I miss that? I spent way more time than I should have staring at their house. I should have noticed. Yeah, like in August. He'd met me and said they were moving and that was it. We all sat there in shocked silence for a little bit until Ella piped up. Feel weird how? Fuzzy. We all turned to Greg. He'd largely been silent but now he looked nervous, passing the joint without taking a puff. We were all done actually, silently but unanimously voting to put it out. No. Ella barked, almost sounding offended. No. No. I mean, I don't think so. Grandma makes us this tea though every Christmas Eve. It's supposed to calm us down. So we sleep, well. As she described it, she scrunched her face up and tugged on her ponytail. Fuck. Fuck. They're drugging us too. Greg looked downright sick. He didn't say it, but from the look on his face, he'd been sleeping way too well on Christmas Eve too. I take Ambien so, they don't really need to, Max said with a shrug. You mean news like Maggie disappearing? I asked. I live right across the street and the cops didn't even show up. No one cared that Maggie died. No one talked about it. No wonder they moved. We all just pretended like she didn't exist. The shamed silence that followed stretched on until Greg's phone buzzed and he announced that he had to go to work. Ella did too, they both worked at the same fast food place. They gave us a half-hearted goodbye. I was exhausted, completely emotionally drained after spilling my guts, and Max offered to drive me home soon after the others left. It was a silent ride. He seemed deep in thought, and I was so tired I didn't even want to try and talk. It didn't matter. I told them. They could think I was crazy all they wanted. I found money on the counter for pizza at home, and put in a Domino's order before finding something to watch. The entire time I sat there all I could think about was Maggie, and how she just disappeared from our little town the moment she was snatched. It was like those things had just wiped her off the map and everyone let it happen. I remembered the obituary halfway through dinner and ran upstairs to dig out the notebook I'd put it in. It wasn't long, that's for sure. Her family had barely put in any description in at all. Like all obituaries, they had put down the date of her death, and that gave me a sudden idea. I started searching. Our town was small and rural, but we did have a newspaper, and it had managed to get a grant a few years ago to make a website and start digitizing everything. That meant that they had decades worth of obituaries to look through. I sat back, shoveling in the last couple slices of cold pizza. Why hadn't I looked this up before? I'd spent most of 2022 trying to forget what I'd seen but being too scared to let it go. All I could think of was Christmas, and what I knew would happen when I was asleep. I'd nearly failed out of school. I'd lost my job, okay it was a shitty one, but still. I was this close to losing any opportunities for a good college. But worse than that, I was probably the only person who had seen what comes on Christmas Eve and lived to talk about it. That gave me a responsibility, right? I knew what they looked like, and what they did. And now, I knew that this had been going on for years. My parents had been drugging me since I was born, so they must have known about it. They grew up here. They had to know. The Smiths had only been in town for a few months. Maybe nobody warned them. Maybe they just went to bed like normal, never knowing the risks. I pulled out my phone, texting Max. I needed him to hook me up with Maggie's brother. I needed to know what happened after she died. Then I messaged everyone on Facebook in one big group chat. There were some families that had lived here for generations and had still had people die. I had the perfect idea on how to contact them. We were going trick-or-treating this year. And number X200B. Trying to talk to Maggie's brother had been a waste of time. I wasn't totally shocked, but I was disappointed. I thought he was actually going to talk to me at first. It had been going fine, even after mentioning how crazy it was that no one talked about his sister's death, when suddenly he stopped replying and blocked me. Blocked me on Insta, on Facebook, and when I tried calling his cell, I got that annoying number not in service robot voice. After that happened, I filled my friends in on why we were going trick-or-treating. It wasn't exactly a popular request, but everyone seemed to agree to it out of pure loyalty. Normally, at 17, you went to a party and got drunk. Mostly because people didn't really love handing out candy to teenagers. This year we'd hit the streets. How'd you convince your parents to let you come out tonight anyways? He held up a plastic bag filled with religious pamphlets. I said I was called to spread the word. So what's the plan? We hit a few houses and try and get candy so we look legit, and then we go to the houses on my list. I answered, pulling out a list and a map where I'd marked everyone down. And you're just going to ask them about their murdered family member? What if there's kids? Don't spiders have like 8 legs? There's only 4. Trick or treat. The door swung open and we all smiled like fools. The woman inside, a lady that looked to be in her 50s, gave us a confused smile back and grabbed her candy bowl. I held up my art the moment the peanut butter cups hit the pillowcase. Do you recognize this? I asked. She paused, looked over my shitty drawing and then shook her head. Okay, that didn't work, I sighed, opening up a snack-sized bag of chips. Do we believe her? Ella asked, doing the same. We all started walking and eating, the salt cutting the handfuls of candy we'd already stuffed ourselves with. Yeah. I don't think she's seen them. She didn't even blink. So I did. The next house was polite as could be considering the question. The house after slammed the door in our faces. The house after that actually took their candy back before rattling the door on its hinges. It was going honestly pretty terrible. Anyone have a pen? I asked suddenly, a last-ditch idea coming to mind. Greg dug through his pamphlet bag and gave me one, and I crouched on the sidewalk to write a quick note on the back of the drawing. I left my phone number and an explanation and slipped it through the rusty old mail slot on the door. It was old, loud, and nearly bit my fingers off trying to get the paper through. Once I saw it disappear, we started to leave. We got nearly a house away before a hoarse yell stopped us. Looking back, a woman that had to be at least in her 80s was waving at us from the place we'd just been. We all froze, sharing nervous glances. I guess some part of me didn't really believe anyone would recognize it. If no one recognized it, then the issue would be moot. I could say I'd done what I could and just start therapy to deal with what I saw. Instead, we all made our way back, meeting the woman on her stoop. What looked like no lights on from the outside was actually the thickest blackout curtains I'd ever seen. Every window we could see was completely covered, and barred. When she shut the door, she locked it and braced it with a chair. Not that I think it really mattered, the thing looked like an industrial security door from the inside. What really stood out to me though, and what I couldn't stop staring at, was her fireplace. It just didn't really exist anymore. She'd filled the bottom with cement, gated it, and wrapped the gate with barbed wire. I was in shock. She sat comfortably on a recliner just across from us, a shotgun stuffed in what looked like a magazine holder. Well. Poor kid. You must live near that girl that died. There was just one last year, I believe. I'm sorry, dear, that's just something no one should ever see. Beside me, Greg, Max, and Ella had all sunken into themselves. Ella looked like she might throw up at any second. So it's real? She asked, pulling off her fake nose. They're real. While she talked, Ella and I rifled through the box. There were dates, times. Letters written from strangers describing what they'd seen. There were drawings too, much better than mine but all displaying something similar. The collection went back through the years. What's this? I asked, holding up a photo of a roof. It looked like someone made a mistake taking the photo. All you saw was a snowy roof and these strange white smears. That's how they show up on camera. The only reason we know what they look like is eyewitness accounts. Even video doesn't capture them. They end up looking like glitter. She heaved a big sigh, eyes on the ceiling, face looking suddenly more gaunt and drawn than when we'd first seen her. They always come in threes. Never seen a house without three. They always come down the chimney. They take the first waker they come across. One per house. Only one per house. Then they leave, on to the next, and so on, until every house has been hit. Can't we just, close up the chimneys? Max asked, pointing to the cement job she'd done on hers. Won't that just solve it all? What about apartments? She was right. There wasn't an apartment anywhere within the boundaries of the town. Even double-story houses were weird. If someone built something other than the usual flat single-story home, you could guarantee the neighbors would gossip. It was too flashy. At some point Greg had returned, and then left again at mention of cleaning the roof. The rest of us sat there in numb silence as Rosie talked. Finally the memories seemed to take their toll on her. "Time's up, kids, Halloween is over," she announced, straightening up and taking the box back. "The best I can suggest is that you take those pills. Take enough. Sleep through. Try and pretend you don't know what you know." She cleared her throat and held out her hand. "Reese's." We all stood there like deer in headlights before someone snapped out of it and dropped a couple candies in her hand. Honestly, it seemed fair. We all paid our toll and she walked us to the door. "Here, one last treat. I don't know what they are, but I know they aren't anything holy." She dropped a thick notebook in my pillowcase and patted me on the shoulder, then gently shoved us out the door, and slammed it behind us. After that, we didn't talk for a couple weeks. It was like we all silently but mutually agreed that we couldn't be around each other after we'd learned the truth about Christmas in our little town. I couldn't even open the book that Rosie gave me. I hid it under my bed, gave my candy to Sarah, and stopped all my research. I didn't want to even think about it. And for the first time since Christmas last year, I managed to sleep.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
I played Never Have I Ever with my friends, but it turned into the worst night of my life, by Sam Haysom. Never have I ever had a threesome. I didn't drink. Just glanced over at Jenny and rolled my eyes. She shook her head in response. "Oh yeah? And where would I find them, exactly?" "Just look for the two most satisfied girls on campus." Jack picked up his pint and winked. "They'll be more than happy to confirm the story." I snorted. Couldn't help myself. Jack might have been a prick, but he always made me laugh. He made Jenny laugh too, even if she didn't always like to show it. The three of us had been in a flat together in our first year of university, and by December we'd already signed up to share a house for our second year. We'd made the decision fast, giddy with the honeymoon stage of our new friendship. Looking at the frown on Jenny's face after Jack's last comment, I decided to intervene. Calm things down before the night took a turn for the worse. "Hang on a minute, mate. You can't drink on your own turn, can you? Surely that defeats the point of saying, never have I ever." Jack looked back at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Sure you can. I checked the rules." "There's no way you Googled the rules of Never Have I Ever before we..." "He's right, you know." "Well, feel free to wait with us and play a few rounds, if you want." Jack was saying now. "These two keep ganging up on me, and I could use someone on my side. What did you say your name?" "Okay, thanks. I'll stick around for a while." The girl smiled at Jack. She brushed a lock of blonde hair from her forehead as she took a seat opposite me. I saw Jack's grin widen. I snuck a glance at Jenny and saw her sitting back in her seat, arms folded. Face unreadable. "Well, we're going round clockwise, and I just had my turn," said Jack. "So I guess that means it's your go." I looked back up, my embarrassment gone as quickly as it had come. Never have I ever woken up in an empty house. What was that about? Never have I ever might not have been the best drinking game at uni, but I'd yet to meet a student who hadn't played it before. Everyone had. It was the kind of time-killing game you played when you didn't have a pack of cards, or when everyone was too drunk to bother with them. And because we'd all played it, we all knew the unwritten rule: the stuff you said was always sexual. It was always something sex-related. The idea was to make a statement like Jack's one about having had a threesome, then wait and see who drank. The people who drank were the ones who'd done it. I cast my mind back, trying to think of a time I'd played when it hadn't been like that. I couldn't. But being Jack, he was also the quickest to recover. He spun his glass slowly on the table and grinned across at Jenny, who had just taken a sip from hers. I took a gulp of my own drink, trying to pretend I hadn't heard the edge that had crept into Jenny's voice. Jack did the same. As I put my pint down, I stole another glance at the girl sitting opposite me. Her face was impossible to read. She had a drink in front of her that I hadn't noticed before, what looked like a gin and tonic, and she was prodding at the glass with her finger. If she had any idea she'd said something the rest of us found odd, she didn't show it. The game continued. After a bit of coaxing, Jenny eventually had her turn, and then a few minutes later I had mine. Jack went to get another round of drinks, then came back and took his. And then it was the blonde girl's turn again. I remember Jack saying something about shower sex that made everyone laugh. I remember downing a pint while the others chanted around me, banging the table in unison. I remember locking eyes with the blonde girl, catching her half smirk as she brushed hair from her face. While everyone else continued with the usual kind of shit, the blonde girl carried on saying weird stuff. Kind of creepy stuff. Sometimes it produced awkward laughter, sometimes an awkward silence. Sometimes Jack would make an innuendo. A couple of times Jenny rolled her eyes in a really obvious way, and once she pretty much burst out laughing as soon as the girl was done talking. Never have I ever woken up from a nightmare I couldn't remember. Never have I ever been completely terrified without knowing why. Never have I ever refused to look in the bathroom mirror, in case someone was standing behind me. Hole up, Max is tappin' out. Jack's words slurred into each other. He grinned up at me and drained his pint. Get us another round in, mate. I edged past the back of his chair. Saw Jenny sitting opposite Jack, her arms folded. Isn't it her turn to get a round in? Jenny's eyes were wide and bloodshot from booze. She stared at Jack, unblinking. The anger in her face obvious. Before I was clear of the table, I made eye contact with the blonde girl one last time. Her green eyes fixed on mine. She held my gaze for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she winked. The rest of that night is a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing. When I think back to it now, I'm not sure what's real and what isn't. Which memories are true and which are false, conjured up by my own head to fill in the blanks. The last clear memory I have from that night is of the argument. Arguing with a group of strangers. I was swaying next to a table at the back of the bar, next to our table, and I was telling the people sat there that they were in my seat. They were in all our seats. That me and my friends had been sitting there. / I woke in the darkness of my bedroom. Lurched out of sleep like a drowning man desperate for air. My brain felt like it had swollen in my skull. My head pounded. I could taste alcohol and bile in my mouth. My tongue was so dry I couldn't swallow, and my stomach was empty save for acid. I reached over to my bedside table, feeling for a glass of water, and found my phone instead. Right then I didn't care. Right then the only thing I wanted was for the pain in my head to go away. I reached out and turned on the tap. Stared at myself as I waited for the water to go cold. Tried to remember what had happened the previous night, and how I'd got home. As I felt the water change in temperature, I lowered my head. Drank from the stream like an animal. Felt the cold liquid rush into my mouth, smoothing out the sandpaper of my tongue. When I finished, I splashed water on my face. Turned the tap off and wiped my eyes as I straightened up. She'd been there, in the mirror. I'd seen her. This wasn't like one of my drunken memories that blended into a dream. She'd been in my bathroom. But now the bathroom was empty. I must have imagined it. Only I hadn't imagined it. I knew I hadn't. All that happened months ago now. When I look back on that night, I always ask myself what I could have done differently. Whether I could have changed the outcome. There are lots of things I think about, lots of specific moments, and memories, and that note is one of them. As ridiculous as it was, as unbelievable as it was, I still wonder if I should have given it to the police. If I should have handed it over. But when I start thinking like that, the thought that always comes back is this: they wouldn't have taken it seriously. Never have I ever met a succubus. I didn't believe them when they told me Jenny was dead. I couldn't. I heard their words, but they didn't make any sense to me. They didn't seem real. The officer said Jenny had been found in an alleyway behind the bar where we were drinking. Lying behind a dumpster. An ambulance had been called, but she'd been pronounced dead at the scene. A heart attack, I found out later. They had some questions for me, and I guess I answered them. Questions about where we'd been, and how much we'd been drinking. About who we'd been drinking with. I'm sitting in the bedroom of my parents' house right now, staring out the window, and I can feel the crinkle of it in my jeans. Usually I keep the thing tucked in my wallet when I'm out, so it's with me wherever I go. A reminder. A reminder of what happened that night. A reminder of my friends. A reminder that, no matter how many mysteries are uncovered in the world every day, and no matter how many crimes the police solve, there are just as many that they never do. Just as many questions that remain unanswered. Like the question of Jack. They never found him in the end. They looked everywhere, and they interviewed people, but nothing came up. Just dead ends. A few people in the bar confirmed that they'd seen him that night, but that was about it. The CCTV in the place hadn't been working, the owner said it had malfunctioned earlier that day, and they'd been waiting to get it fixed. Jack hasn't been seen since. I still Google his name every now and again, though. Just to check. As far as I know, the case is still active, and the police are still looking for him. So I keep checking in, just to see if anything new has come up. To see if there have been any updates on the search. But there never are. And if I'm really, truly honest with myself, I don't think there ever will be.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I found a zipper on the back of my neck. I found it by accident. I was putting my hair up, something I did almost every day. My hand brushed against something at the bottom of my hairline. It could have been a large skin tag. I finished tying my hair up and grabbed my phone, so I could see the thing better. When I saw it, I wasn't sure what it was. It was too big for a skin tag, but not the shape of a tick or something foreign. I realized as I stared at it that it was the top of a zipper. It was darker than my skin tone. It was more like a rosy gray. I nervously reached behind me to touch it. It was smooth, as if made of metal. But it wasn't metal. It was skin. Just not my skin. "I'm in here," I called, my voice shaking and off. "No. Go downstairs." He paused. "Are you okay?" I heard his body slump against the door. He was crying again. "How long are you going to punish me?" I was at the mirror again, pulling the zipper further down. The black liquid was mostly contained within the zipper, but droplets made their way down my back. Something large was pushing against my spine. I could see it, like a fetus's fist against a mother's stomach. It pressed outward, making my neck and back look bumpy. There was something in there. Something that needed to come out. I fell to my knees as the foreign hand pulled the zipper further. It was at my shoulder blades, then the middle of my back, and then the lower back. My skin was peeled forward like a cocoon. The hand withdrew inside me. After a few moments, a leg revealed itself, stretching out of my body like a dancer. Then another leg. Bent backward, feet now on the floor, a figure completely emerged. It straightened itself. Long hair stuck to its body. She closed the door behind her.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I've been homeless for the last 16 years. This Is Why, by Cosmogoblin. Part 2, Part 3. When they meet me, people wonder why. I've made up all sorts of lies, and occasionally told the truth. Even rarer, somebody believes me. I've finally decided to set it down in writing, to record it for after I pass on, and so that I don't have to repeat the story. Next time somebody asks, they can simply read this. Most people just walk past a homeless person. Some will give spare change, that's rarer these days, with fewer people carrying cash, but there are enough kind people willing to go into shops for me that I get by. Barely. For the last 7 years I've lived on the streets of a city in West Africa, I won't name it. I get by on the charity of others and doing gardening jobs, and a bit of bricklaying, in the early stages of construction, at least. I have to bail on those jobs when houses are nearing completion, as you'll see. But I grew up in northern England. My parents are, fairly wealthy, and I attended a private school. Not one you'll likely have heard of, but my education was excellent. My life was going very well, I had plenty of friends, and I was getting good grades in science, French and Latin. I had won a few minor piano competitions, and enjoyed skiing holidays in Switzerland most years. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm boasting. That's not my intention, I'm just presenting my life as it was, so that you fully appreciate the contrast, and so that you understand I had no reason to run from it. 10 meters walk to the toilet. And that was the last time I was ever in England. I pushed open the toilet door, walked through, and was hit in the face by freezing snow. After about half an hour I saw a light in the distance. I'd been shivering for some time, but I felt alert, so didn't think I was at immediate risk of hypothermia. I kept going, and soon arrived at a small cottage with lights on in the downstairs windows. He introduced himself as Louis. I managed to stammer out a, "Where am I?" to which he replied that I was on a beach near Port-au-Prince. With me still barely able to articulate myself, Louis offered his help. He asked where my parents were, and when I couldn't answer, he led me to his car, saying that he could drive me to his house and we could figure things out from there. I cried. Good riddance, I thought. It made me far too identifiable anyway. Victor was bigger than me, and knew the city. He hadn't lived on the streets that long, but he was far more streetwise than I was, and he showed me how to survive. Over the next few months I learned where to steal food, where to beg, where the driest shelters were, and even how to pickpocket. Passau has a small homeless community, but a close one, and I got to know some people very well. It's fair to say by the time my 14th birthday rolled around, I was much more aware and capable. I learned German, and practiced my French with a fellow migrant. I learned how to repair clothes, and how to haggle with street vendors. I was still small for my age, and found that I could wriggle into and hide in very tight spaces. Victor and I had been working together for a year, and we carried out our well-rehearsed routine. We hung around a busy street until I saw two men come out of a pub, one of them putting his wallet in his back pocket as he left. Perfect. I signaled to Victor and started walking behind them. After a few moments Victor bumped into him from the side, giving me the opportunity to lift his wallet. I ran. I was the fastest in our gang, but one of them was faster than me, and he nearly caught me. Seeing no other option, I legged it towards the main street and made my way to a shop. The staff were just closing up, but I didn't need to get in there, I just needed to pass the threshold. I made it through the door. This time I landed in Sweden, in the middle of the countryside. It was early afternoon and sunny, so I walked until I found a road and followed signs to Gothenburg. That was 15 kilometers, and a few drivers offered me a lift along the way, though obviously I declined. I was, in a way, starting to feel quite confident now. I'd relocated twice, and felt that I knew what to do. Sweden is a nice place, even for the homeless, especially if you're young and white. Strangers were generally kind and I did well there. However, it can get very cold on the streets in winter, and when snow started to fall, I realized I wasn't likely to survive until spring. So in November, for the first time, voluntarily, I walked through a shop door and into another country. Did that woman, 3 years earlier, curse me? She had seemed strange but not unkind. Perhaps she simply realized, before I did, that I'd been cursed by someone, or something, else. I didn't know, not back then, but I knew a bit about how it worked. I collected some fallen logs and branches, and over about an hour I built a rectangular frame, a doorway. I stepped through. Okay, so that didn't work. Maybe it needed an actual door. I could hardly build hinges in the forest, even if I knew how. So instead I gathered some vines and leaves, and strung them into a hanging door from the top of the frame, like a beaded curtain. Honestly, I was quite proud of my handiwork. For a first attempt with no tools I was very impressed, and almost reluctant to test it. But it was cold and dark and starting to rain, so I stepped through it. I judged that it was a long way to a city, and learned later that I was correct. So I decided to introduce myself to the farmers. They spoke barely any English, and I didn't yet speak any Swahili, but I managed to persuade the family that ran the farm to let me work for them. I'm sure they didn't really understand my motivations, a posh white English boy asking only for food in exchange for his labor, choosing to sleep outside, but they were friendly and happy with the arrangement. Over the next 2 years I learned how the farm worked, built up my muscles. I'm still small and wiry, but strong, and proved myself to be an able worker. I picked coffee beans, milked cows, fixed fences, and acquired a decent tan. I even occasionally made the journey to a nearby market town, sitting in the back of one of the flatbed trucks. I was certainly a curiosity to the locals, but I was treated well. I would happily have stayed on that Kenyan farm for life. But after 2 years, something happened. The father of the household was off at the market town, and the rest of us were working the fields. I was bringing several baskets of coffee beans to the barn, and I heard shouting. Msada! Msada! Help! Help! The mother of the household, Anissa, had fallen in the kitchen. From outside I could tell that her leg was bad. It was bleeding severely, and I think I could see bones sticking out. It was rare that there was just one person in the farmhouse, but it did happen. The closest help was probably at least 10 minutes away, and Anissa was bleeding too fast. I was the only one who could help, but I needed to get in there, somehow. Obviously the door was out of the question, but the kitchen window was wide open. Were windows safe? The answer, it turned out, was no. I hope Anissa got the help she needed, though I doubt it. But the last I saw of her, as I swung a leg into the kitchen, was an expression of abject terror. And then she and the farmhouse disappeared, replaced in an instant with the nighttime streets of Seoul. Without the kind of network I'd built up in Germany and China, things were more difficult. I got caught a few times, and escaped before anything serious happened, until after about a year, I guessed that the police had had a few reports of street thefts in my area. I noticed an increased police presence, and one day I just got sloppy. A couple were having coffee outside a cafe at lunchtime. The man's wallet was on the table between them, and I was hungry. I pulled my hoodie over my face, ran, and grabbed the wallet. While I was running away I pulled the cash out, throwing the wallet on the ground. Then 10 minutes later, the police found me. I'd found another cafe with outdoor service. It wasn't far enough away, and I guess I hadn't hidden my face as well as I thought. I wasn't in a tourist area, and it was pretty easy to identify the only white man around, especially as I was wearing the same clothes. I saw two policemen walking towards me and started to run, but this time they were faster. They tackled me to the ground and bundled me into their patrol car. It was dark. Too dark to see anything. At first I assumed I was on the other side of the world, at night, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized I was underground. I could make out very little at first, and decided to head toward the torches while I figured out what my new situation was. As I got closer I realized the torches surrounded a pit, and I could make out people under the torches. Some of them looked up as I approached, but they didn't say anything. All were inside the pit, which I could now see covered a rough square maybe 30 meters to a side. And then I heard something else. A kind of chittering. The humans I was with numbered about 50, quite diverse, but young. There were teenagers and people in their 20s, but no older. At 19 I was pretty much in the middle, age-wise. A woman approached me and started speaking French. Great, at least I could understand her. It's impossible to tell time down in that underground cavern, but I gathered it was about the start of their effective night time. The woman, who introduced herself as a Parisian named Josie, explained that the Beatles used them for labor and other things, although she refused to elaborate on what other things meant. They kept them fed, made them work for half the day, but otherwise more or less left them alone. Josie introduced me to the others, showed me to the food, almost exclusively berries and mushrooms, and told me to fill my belly and rest as well as I could, as I would be put to hard work the next day. She was right. The next day I was woken by a human, Carl, shaking me. The Beatles had already set up the ramp, and were bringing us up in groups of 4. I had no intention of being used as a slave, but decided against taking action until I'd figured things out a bit more. My group was led down a maze of tunnels for about 20 minutes until we arrived at a broader cave, though much smaller than the main cavern. One of the Beatles held a flat piece of slate, on which they had drawn a chalk diagram. They may not be able to speak human languages, but they can hold things with their front limbs and draw. It pointed to each of us in turn, then to a part of the drawing, then to an area of the cave. Jerome, a dark-skinned man from Senegal, explained what I'd already figured out. The Beatles wanted us to excavate the cave, according to the plan on the slate. So I got to work pickaxing and chiseling out a room for the insects. After maybe an hour, the Beatles left. Sandy, a Canadian girl of 15, told me that while we could speak freely, the tunnels were maze-like. She had run once, but if there was anywhere to go, she hadn't found it. The Beatles had left a few torches for us to work by, but they had much better night vision than we did, and while we would get lost in the tunnels, they could seemingly make their way just fine in complete darkness. I think insects lay trails using pheromones as well, so they don't even need to see in the tunnels. And so it continued for a long time. I carved out cave rooms, made what I believe was insect furniture, I still don't know where they got the wood, and even worked a forge. We marked our days by our rest periods, and long ago somebody had started scratching lines into the wall of the pit to mark each day. As had become tradition, I scratched my name above the day I arrived. This was day 11,408 since the calendar had started, 31 years earlier. We spent our evenings telling stories, true stories of our lives outside, stories we could remember reading, and stories we made up ourselves during the long working days. I suggested singing once, but was shot down immediately. Apparently the Beatles really didn't like human song. It took about 10 minutes, in all, and at the end of it there was nothing left. No sign that anything had happened, except for the blood that trickled down the wall of the pit. We saw and heard it all, the rending of flesh, the crunching of bone, the chittering of the insects in what I can only interpret as excitement. When they were finished, the Beatles stood on the wall, looked down at us, and walked away like nothing had happened. We worked for less than an hour each night, covering the hole with the board and hiding the board with soil. Extracted earth went, little by little, into our waste buckets. After some time we hit solid rock, but the hole was now about 1.5 meters deep. It was enough. Phase 2 of the plan was riskier. Carving into the solid sections of the wood with sharp rocks made a sound a lot like the Beatles' speech, and we knew they had good hearing. We only dared do a tiny bit each night. But eventually we had a frame, and a door. All we needed now was a hinge. Slowly we scraped out 3 holes along one side of the door, and tied it to the frame with some braided roots we had gathered from the caves. It was done. I doubted it would hold together for long, but it didn't need to. We held a quiet celebration, as much as we could down there, and Louise carved a final message at the end of the timeline, "Fuck you." Sandy volunteered to be the first to test it. For all 50 of us to make it, we would need to move fast, and this is why we had decided to use a trapdoor. It would be quicker to jump down, one after another, than to wriggle horizontally through a doorway that size. We checked the surroundings and, seeing only a couple of beetles not paying much attention to us, we decided on our order. I was number 14. Sandy carefully uncovered the trapdoor, opened it, jumped down, and disappeared. It worked. Trying to contain our excitement, we followed through in our agreed order. As number 11 jumped in, I heard chittering from above. They had noticed something, but we could do nothing about that. We kept filing in, until I jumped down. This is when I arrived in Western Africa, where I've lived for the last 7 years, and where I hope to live for the rest of my natural life.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I'm Patricia Barnes, hitman for ghosts that only I can see. This was a case that really got to me, by Beifel's disciple. If she'd had anything to say, the dried foam on her lips would have been gurgling by now. I plopped myself down on an outdoor chair and took in the surroundings. Truly one of the finest yards in Alabama, Madison, I offered, glancing in contempt at the tongue lolling out of her mouth. I've laid you to rest right next to the beautiful oleanders that I used to poison your tea. Repose en paix. Lifting corpses just leaves my joints exhausted afterwards. Monday mornings are really wearing on me more than they once did. He was a sight. No more than 10 years old, but possessing the eyes of a war veteran. Ashen gray skin with livid purple bruises around his neck. I took a less than respectable gulp from the sweet tea. The topless man had flustered me, and I wanted to cool down enough to at least give the appearance of presentability to the child. He looked at me with innocent confusion. He was a cute kid, honest to God, and cute kids annoy the bejesus out of me. Especially dead ones. Well then we have no business to conduct, I quipped. I looked up in disappointment to find that the topless ghost had wandered off. I sighed. He shook his head. No, that's not it. My sister's alive right now. He quivered, and looked like he was about to cry. But she might not be for much longer. He shook his head again in urgency. The purple bruises on his neck gave me the heebie-jeebies. No doctor can save her, because they don't know where she is. But even doctors won't be able to make her better if she's there much longer. He stepped closer and gave me these terrible doe-like eyes that made me want to smack him and then have a good cry. I sighed. I cackled quietly. You think Sophocles is just a cat? Thank God we can get through the door, I muttered, looking up at the ivy-covered trellis. It's been many years since I've been confident in my prowess at negotiating second-floor windows. Though you'd be surprised what a body can do when motivated by the promises of a conjugal visit. The boy fidgeted. I lied. He might be in there. I didn't think you'd come rescue my sister if it were too dangerous. One of the worst things about dead people is that you can't smack them. Everyone knows someone who needs a good smack, and that need is only compounded by the fact that societal expectations preclude us from delivering a much-needed antidote to the slap-deprived. He looked at me like he was going to cry. Again. Nor did the knowledge that the criminal who resided here might show up at any second. Nevertheless, I clawed my way along the floor of the disgusting man's abode in search of the basement door. My hand found cool metal, and I smiled grimly. I flicked the cigarette lighter just long enough to fit the key into the door. It opened with a satisfying click. I could feel the temperature drop significantly with every step. I'd expected a full staircase of around 19 steps, but was off by about 13. I came to rest on a dirt floor that was far too close to the ceiling. Claustrophobia crept around the edges of my brain. Keep going, came the voice of the ghost behind me. The air was thick and musty. A cigarette, though. That would have hit the spot. I was just thinking about how nice that would be when I felt the girl's arm. I jumped as the boy spoke. We had found a flashlight on the floor before I died. My mind raced. I had tried to remain discreet as possible, but light was going to be a necessity if I had to haul this girl out of here. I reached around on the floor, found the flashlight, and clicked it on. The girl was staring, unblinking, right at me. I forgot to breathe. I gasped, then controlled my breathing. Hey, kid, I offered tentatively as I crept toward her. Wake up. We'd best be leaving right now. I touched her shoulder and shook it. The girl's skin yielded disgustingly to my touch, but her body was grotesquely stiff. Her eyes were like glass. I stopped hiding my tears. I'm sorry, kid. I heaved a shuddering gasp. Let me talk to her. Where is she? The boy didn't move. He seemed very old. You didn't save her, he explained simply. Why? I searched for words and found none. Please, I gasped. Let me speak with her. I looked wildly around for answers that I couldn't find. I briefly noticed the door to what looked like an underground bomb shelter, which was creepy enough in its own right, but I didn't have time to process what I was seeing. Part of me broke then. I was surprised. By that time in my life, I had figured all the tiny pieces that were left of me had been too small for cracking. But I suppose the world isn't above grinding even the tiniest pieces into the finest of dust. Then a tiny girl's arm reached from beyond the door, and took his hand in hers. She pulled him away, and he disappeared. I remember that he was smiling. A warm, furry force suddenly pushed against me in the darkness. I reached out and scratched Sophocles behind the ears. I dried my eyes again. "You're right, it's time to stand up," I sniffed.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock, knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
I've been deaf for 14 years. A couple days ago, I heard "I Wish I Never Had" by So Much Peanut. I don't remember much of my birthday party. Erica Sander tipped her chair so far back that she toppled right over, and her mother took her home early, scolding her about safety as she struggled with our barely functional front door. George McCullough showed us how he could snort milk through his nose. I threw a tantrum over the girly colors on my cake. My stepfather demanded that everyone leave early, red in the face, barely holding composure. I woke up in the hospital several hours later, confused, ears still ringing, dark bruises on my neck, near one eye, and obscuring both sides of my head. I couldn't hear the doctor's words as he smiled warmly and welcomed me back into consciousness. I couldn't hear my mother's cries. I couldn't even hear my own screams. My stepfather moved out several days later. Finally, on the bus home, I settled my briefcase in my lap and began to map out my evening in my mind. Thinking quickly, I tapped the shoulder of the woman sitting beside me. She turned to look at me, clearly annoyed, and I held up a finger to signal her to wait. I hurriedly pulled out a piece of paper and messily scrawled the name of my stop and a short explanation of my situation in the hopes that she could tell me when the driver announced Parkside Drive. When I turned to show her the paper, she had already moved to a new seat. You'd think nearly a decade of a half of being deaf would bring me enough experience to deal with a situation like this, but I wasn't good at coping. I sighed and began to count the stops, trying to estimate how many stops I needed to sit through to get to my own. Annoyance bubbled under my skin. Without thinking, I angrily tore the small piece of paper into several pieces, clenching the crumpled bits in my fist. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd spent the past 6 hours in bed, window wide open, straining to hear any hint of sound. I barely cared that I had to work the next day. I'd gotten a taste of what I'd missed for 2/3 of my life, and I wanted more. "What are you waiting for?" My conversation partner did not deliver. I had half turned away when something odd caught my eye. Something was not quite right. As I turned back to investigate, I placed my finger on the glaring inconsistency. My reflection hadn't moved an inch. It was almost 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd emailed my boss to let her know I was sick. I suppose that wasn't really a lie. I was lightheaded and nauseous from my encounter, but I knew what I had to do. Duct tape will do better. I haphazardly tossed a roll of duct tape and a crowbar onto the counter. Glancing at the digital numbers displaying my total, I handed the cashier a wad of crumpled bills and headed out with my supplies. My voice directed me onto a bus, and before I knew it, I was headed into an eerily familiar part of the city. The houses grew smaller and shabbier as we went, lawns losing their perfectly even green to be replaced with overgrown weeds and dead, brown grass. Then, even the houses began to dwindle, towering, dark, damp apartment buildings taking their place. The elevator groaned as it ascended, and I felt as though I might groan, too. Anxiety racked my bones, but my steps had become sure. Knock. You know he's home. I sucked in one deep breath and rapped my knuckles against the door. What? A gruff voice responded from inside. I didn't dare answer. My stepfather yanked the door open, his face a deep shade of red that I remembered all too well. He opened his mouth, taken aback by the sight of the stepson he hadn't seen in nearly 14 years, but before he could speak, I had struck him with the crowbar. He crumpled to the ground and I nearly didn't recognize the sight of him on the floor. He was weak, arms limp at his sides, powerless. Impeccable timing. Just like in the movies. My reflection began to giggle that high-pitched giggle and all I wanted to do was cover my ears and drown it out. Did he deserve to die? My voice startled me out of thought. Maybe. Maybe not. At the very least, he deserved to pay. I finally responded. So you get to play God? You get to dole out punishments as you see fit? My voice giggled. You told me to do this. You're not so innocent, yourself. He stared me down as he lifted my bloody knife into view. I backed away instinctively, words still on the verge of spilling over my tongue. My reflection stayed put. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I stared in disbelief as he took his tongue between two fingers and raised the blade against it. My mouth was slightly agape but I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Blood dribbled down his chin and I could hear the droplets fall to the floor as well as if they were in the same room with me. I slowly lifted my fingers to my own lips to find that they were wet. Tentatively, I glanced down to find what I had feared. The floor was darkened at my feet with a gathering pool of blood. I opened my mouth, but while I felt a shriek escape my throat, all I could hear was the guttural choking laugh of my reflection. I will never speak again. I've broken every mirror in my apartment. All I can do now is sit and wait for the consequences of my crimes to unfold, or at least further consequences.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Like I fucking cared. Life didn't turn out like I imagined, and I strongly believe I can blame everything on my father. It started with him, and I wanted it to end with him. Fuck me, I'm getting agitated just thinking about it. Even when my sister was sick, he acted like I was the problem. When she got better, it was because of him. Not the doctors, not mom, not me, not the family, no, it was all him. Some sort of messed up, perverted messiah complex. I pulled it. The creature was humanoid, a fair bit taller maybe. Chained to the floor, heavy shackles on feet and arms, it lay face down, naked on the cold, rough ground. It was thin. Lethargic. Gruesomely malnourished and abused. Its skin was ashen gray in complexion, and ridden by plague-like infections and boils, horrid deep scars and lacerations. A thick, foul piss-yellow liquid seeped from the wounds, forming stomach-churning pools by the thing's blackened and gangrenous sides. It wheezed and coughed sickly, still somehow alive. Still somehow breathing. But it did. It showed me everything. All those years in an instant. A single flash in my mind. How my father had captured it. Bound it. Tortured it for his own gains. Wealth. Sex. Perversions. Every vile, despicable, inhuman thing you could imagine. Whips, daggers, needles, fire, cold, all instruments my father wielded to get what he wanted from that poor creature. I didn't need to think about it. I'm no fucking saint, no Mother Teresa, but I knew in that instant what was right. What was merciful. I gripped my knife tightly, stood over the creature, staring into its endless, tormented gaze, grabbed it by the hair, and slit its throat from ear to ear. I knew that wasn't enough. I knew I needed to sever the tie. Cut off the head. So I sliced. And sliced. And sliced. I've taken away your piggy bank, I laughed, you're a fucking nobody again now. I bathed in the heavenly glow of my father's fatalistic misery. It was glorious, beautiful. And oh, he collapsed on the floor, tears streaming from his eyes. You don't understand, what have you done? Dad, my sister's voice called from the darkness. Dad, I'm not feeling so good. Michael, her eyes were filled with dread. What's happening? What's happening to me? She took a single step in my direction. Almost close enough. Close enough for one final embrace. But all I could do was stare in disbelief as she collapsed before me, falling face down on the floor. That sound. That horrible sound of her head cracking open. I can't describe it.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Just found out I can't have kids, and my mother is pissed. Pretty sure I was supposed to birth the Antichrist, by calf red. So, you're saying she's barren? My mother was crying. The doctor winces. That's not the first word I would use, but she is infertile, yes. She turns to me. I'm sorry, Lorelei, but this early menopause is irreversible. You're not going to be able to have biological children when you're older. She was making this a really big fucking deal. Yeah, it's not great, but come on, I'm 17 and not really too worried about my status as a child bearer when I'm older. And hey, not getting a period for the rest of my life sounds like a pretty sweet deal. So there were no tears from my eyes when I heard the news, but Mom is wailing like I just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. I make eye contact with the doctor, and give a half-hearted shrug. She looks away. The only sound in the examination room is the cry of my mother. A few days later, and she's still not out of her funk. The door to her bedroom is shut and locked, and despite my persistent knocking, she refuses to answer, her endless cries wafting through the wood and reverberating through the rest of the house. I pour some boxed pasta into the pot, and wince as the water splashes over, the stove hissing in protest. Sadie, my younger sister of 4 years, watches from the kitchen table. I'm sick of pasta, she snorts. I roll my eyes. You don't like it, cook for yourself. Ever since the news, Mom hasn't done anything / eating, showering, talking. It's so unlike her. She's always been the most resilient woman I've ever known, a super mom, taking on the role of both mother and father for Sadie and I after our dad passed away. A pang of guilt settles into my chest as a noticeably loud sob bounces through the kitchen. I bark out a laugh. Yeah, I guess she's pissed I can't be an incubator for her grandkids. I interrupt the silence. You done your homework yet? Her eyes soften at that. You're not a disappointment, Lori, it's not your. She is interrupted by a knock at the door. We are interrupted again by an even more surprising sound, our mother's bed creaking as she bounds out of bed, through her door, and to the foyer, throwing open the front door with a flourish. I gaze from the kitchen. A man I have never seen before stands in the doorway, balding and gray, a satchel on his hip and round glasses on his face. Nathan, she says, relief evident in her voice. Please, come in. Hi, I respond, and Sadie follows suit. Would you like some pasta? Nathan chuckled humorlessly. No thank you, dear. His voice immediately puts me on edge. It's nice to meet you too. Your mother has told me wonderful things. Sadie was never one for subtleties. Mom, she says, who is this, and why is he here? Nathan laughs and my mom blushes. Be polite. Girls, Nathan is here to help us. We're going to head to my office, all of us. What the fuck? Sadie whispers, and I don't even hear my mother reprimand her over the buzzing in my head. I've never seen anything like this. The walls are stained with crimson messages, which I pray are in paint rather than blood. He is coming. Wooden totems litter the floor, pulled together with broken bones and filthy string. The skeleton of what looks to be a sheep slumps in the corner, like a toddler in timeout. A pentagram beats down from the ceiling like a sun. Sorry, what? I stutter, eyes fixed on the sheep carcass. Sadie and I make eye contact, and turn towards the door, and Nathan moves to block it, his frame taking up the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. I fear there is no time to waste, my mother continues. Who knows what the next few years will bring? Which is why I brought Nathan, to give Sadie a child before all hope is lost. What? Sadie shrieks, and I feel my jaw drop. You're fucking insane. I scream. You're fucking crazy. This fucking creep is not going to rape my sister. Adrenaline rushing through my veins, I turn to where Nathan stands, hands reaching for his zipper as my mother approaches Sadie. No fucking way. I scream. The next moments seem like a blur. Sadie begins to sob as my mother braces her hands on her shoulders. Nathan's fly goes down as he fumbles with the zipper. And my foot, in Doc Martens, collides straight with his groin as hard as I could, eliciting a groan as he crumples to the floor. Fucking pervert, I scream. As we race down the stairs, my mother's straggled voice follows us. You won't get away, you fucking whores. We are all over the world. And we will serve our father. Sadie is sobbing as I throw open the front door and we run into the night, destination nowhere. I have no fucking idea where to go from here. And I swear, I feel something watching us. I think we are monumentally screwed. Reddit, any advice? Part 2.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
Being a doctor destroys the assumption that certain things are impossible. A human body can do that. A person you love can be so damaged. For half a second, the night was still. I closed my eyes and took a slow, rattling breath. I dove to Dr. Brutson's side, taking in everything I could at once. Facial lacerations with severe hemorrhaging. Nothing apparent on the back of his head, since the front absorbed the fall. Compound fracture of the spine. Likely internal bleeding, likely fractures of both tibias. I could hear his unholy gasps for air. And the spurts of blood told me that he had a pulse, but his artery, likely one of the subclavians, was ruptured. That's not a good sign. I scrambled around his twitching body and pressed firmly on his upper back, stemming the geyser of blood. I looked up to see Lydia being followed by one other nurse. They must have run outside after hearing the screaming. And the splatting. I felt detached as I got to work. For a few moments, my hands moved of their own accord, following their implicit duties as the emotional part of my mind understood that it needed to drift away. It's your fault that no gurney is here, a little boy's voice whispered softly into my ear. We tell ourselves that there's nothing we could have done to take away someone else's hurt. That's usually a struggle to believe, because it's usually not true. I didn't cry. I was too busy combating exsanguination while trying to avoid compromising the exposed spinal column of a convulsing man. You know that he is going to die. It won't happen right away. Will it be 10 minutes? Or 20? The timbre of his voice, nearly musical, could have passed for any young child's teasing if it weren't for the years of sorrow running deep beneath his words. Lydia appeared with a team of nurses and J.D., the first-year intern who had alerted us to Brutson's rooftop stroll. I was still trying to save him. "He's stable, let's move," I ordered once we had gotten him onto the gurney. We met Dr. Scrit, who was running toward us, as we rolled him into the hospital's front entrance. I met her eyes only once. It was enough to tell me just how badly I had failed by ignoring her instructions to take the gurney outside with me. I took the judgment and pushed it deeply into my chest, allowing utter clinical focus on the task at hand. His convulsions had stopped. So had the blood spurts. "What's his BP?" Lydia looked closely. 140/100, she responded grimly. "Where else is he bleeding from?" "Patient isn't breathing. His trachea is too damaged. BP is 170/130. 17/13. He's still losing blood somewhere. We can't stop the internal bleeding. Patient still not breathing." That's when his body convulsed once more as though every organ was sneezing simultaneously. Sudden capillary ruptures burst sprays of blood through his eyes, nose, ears, and broken mouth like a blood zit had exploded from within. No, I didn't want to call time of death. As long as the work continued, I was able to avoid confronting emotions that I could domesticate but not tame. Dr. Scrit raised her eyebrows at me. I let out a soft breath of air. "Time of death, 4:32 a.m. Okay, I have to finish here, and dash. Now." Which is how I found myself trailing behind her on the journey to the office of the Chief of Medicine. She regarded me silently for a moment prior to speaking. "Before you shed too many tears for yourself, Dr. Aphelis, remember that the impending grief for Dr. Brutson's family will be far greater." She peered down at me over her thin spectacles. "Most people find comfort in extremes, Dr. Aphelis. They want to be seen as good, of course, but the second best option is never partially good, partially bad. Those who are told they're not any good want the comfort of hearing that they were wrong from the start, because that absolves any responsibility of facing our decisions. We seek comfort in impossible corners." She sighed, pursed her lips, then steadied her shaking hand by balling it into a fist. "I won't fire you for failing to be perfect," she finally answered. My entire body relaxed the tension that I had been unconsciously holding. I wiped my eye once more. Dr. Scrit, when he landed, Dr. Brutson endured severe and immediate trauma. I'm not inclined to think that I could have saved him, even if I'd followed your instructions. Would you agree?" She leaned forward in her chair. "There's a good chance that you're right, and you would get immense comfort if I told you that I agreed. But objective fact exists regardless of my opinion. You will never, ever know for sure. The only way to find relief would have been to follow my instructions from the start. Some things can't be fixed. Remember that last part if you want to endure in the field of medicine." Then she got up, walked around the table, and stood over me. I felt like I was 2 feet tall. "Now, Dr. Aphelis, I have to ask you. Have you been struggling with the rules?" Shit. Double shit. What was I supposed to say? That I'd been the weak one who never got her own set? That I'd pilfered them from a dead colleague? Informing her that I'd lost my stolen copy would certainly be strike 3. I really didn't need a strike 3 in that moment. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was slightly stained, as though it had been plucked from a pool of blood. "You didn't seem to notice that you dropped these while helping me get the dead boy into the incinerator." I like that kind of focus. I looked down at the rules. And for the love of God, memorize these. That is, by far, the easiest solution. That's when the door burst open. J.D. gasped like he'd been running. He was sheet white. It's Dr. Brutzen. My stomach turned to granite. He's dead, Dr. Script responded flatly. Yes, very much so, he answered through desperate breaths of air. We discovered that his spinal cord had been severed at the neck. But that hasn't stopped his body from getting out of bed. And he's really, really angry. Listen. Part 5.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
Who Called 911 by Halixalana. Honey. Wake up, my wife, Anne, is violently shaking me awake. Wake up, she's whispering, but she sounds desperate. I roll over and look at the clock. Just past 3 a.m. It takes me a few minutes to grasp my surroundings. I reach for my glasses on the end table and look over at my wife. She's barely visible in the moonlight, but she looks distraught. James, there's someone in the house. She whispers. My blood runs cold as I quickly glance around the room. I put a finger to my lips, telling her to shoo and gently start to get out of bed. I grab the bat that I keep behind my dresser and slowly start to walk towards my bedroom door. Adrenaline is coursing through my veins. My heartbeat is so loud that I'm worried that, whoever is in my house, might hear it. I slowly open the bedroom door to peer into the hallway. Isn't this guy supposed to be loaded? One voice said, sounding annoyed. Must not have been that good of a life insurance policy if he can't even afford a decent TV. The voice mocked. I shrunk down to the floor as one of the flashlights pointed in my direction. Did you guys hear that? The irritable voice spoke again. No, you're just paranoid man. Another voice finally spoke through the dark. Without warning, something crashed to the floor and shattered. I caught my breath in my chest to avoid letting out the scream that had gathered in my lungs. What the fuck? A third, much deeper voice, whispered fiercely. Sorry, man. Didn't mean to. The first voice mumbled in frustration. Just find the damn safe so we can get out of here. This place creeps me out. My heart felt like it was going to burst from my chest. One thief, I could handle, but there were at least 3 men in my living room. I focused on calming my breathing before standing up again to retreat to my bedroom. A flashlight swung back in my direction, its beam shining directly into my shoulder blades. I thought you said he was out of town. The third voice boomed, sounding enraged. I immediately started running back towards my bedroom. Once I made it into the room, I slammed the door and locked it. I paused for a second to listen. I couldn't hear anything. No whispering, no footsteps. I shoved my bookcase in front of the door and ducked into the master bathroom, shutting and locking that door as well. That's when I heard the banging, coming from the other side of the bedroom door. That bookcase would not hold them long.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
In a town of 1,500 people, attempts to keep people unaware and calm were an utter failure. It was on Facebook by the following day. 9 people who had been at the hospital when the kids were starting to trickle in also started exhibiting these symptoms, I'm told. None lasted more than a few days. By last Friday, 18 people who had indirect contact with the children were reported missing or dead of natural or unknown causes. All had exhibited similar symptoms just before their deaths. It was at this point that I became directly affected. My sister returned from Oro Valley, the closest hospital, a complete wreck. She had gone to visit her friend's new baby and upon arriving had been informed that both her friend and her baby had died. Everything I just told you was told to her by a frightened nurse. I fact-checked what I could. I fell asleep on the couch shortly after waiting for a call back from our town's ME. I woke up to my phone going off. I had 7 texts from friends of mine all reporting the same thing. I made some calls around the city but my usual contacts weren't picking up. I went to check on my sister and she was bleeding from her ear, heavily. Between that and the bruising, I started to wonder if these were actually home invasions at all. I called the 24-hour urgent care in town but no one picked up. I didn't want to risk driving her back to Oro Valley. I then tried 911, which also rang endlessly. I called my friend in Oro who works for a legit newsagent and she told me that they were reporting NW Medical was running a skeleton crew because most of the medical staff had either called in sick or been found dead in their homes. She said she'd seen tanks in Oro. I have called the CDC multiple times but every time I call the same woman answers. The first time she took a statement and said she'd get back to me. Every subsequent time I've called, she immediately puts me on hold. She never comes back to the line. This morning my contact at the police department finally called me back. He told me the death toll is incalculable at this point and that they are being iced out by both the state and federal governments at this point with one exception. 2 people from the CDC showed up yesterday. My contact overheard them talking about Mrs. Booker's cancer treatments as if it were relevant. He doesn't know if it is but he hopes I can make something out of it. I'm scared. My sister is still missing but I'm too afraid to look for her or go into the room she was sleeping in. My hair is falling out from stress. I've been smoking like crazy. This morning I noticed a bruise on my arm. I know my immune system is compromised and I'm too afraid to leave my house. I called my parents in Tucson and left a message but they haven't called back. I noticed a small bruise on my arm that upon further fucking inspection spreads all the way down one side of my back. I'm so fucking scared. I had a breakdown where I just screamed at the wall and cried and there was blood in my tears and that was like an hour ago. I'm going to go over to the neighbors because I can't be alone anymore and fuck it, it's not like I can get it because I've already got it. The sirens have me terrified and the sun is almost down here. My name is Lindsay Allen, I'm 29 and I'm from Mammoth, Arizona.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I know this sounds strange, but this isn't the first time you've read this. It isn't the second, or the third, or even the 100th time either. You've read this same text over and over. But obviously, you've never remembered that, have you? I can't tell you how hard it is for me to do this. Sneaking around under their noses? Easy. Talking to you? Absolutely awful. Unfortunately, I seem to have retained some sort of empathy despite everything I've seen. As such, I'm sending you this. But I'm wasting time. The important part is that you're in immediate danger. No matter which choices you make, today is the day you die. I can't give you an exact time or place, but I can definitely say that they don't want you to live past this day. You always die today, despite everything I've done to try to help. I've sent you letters, emails, hell, I even tried texting you, but it didn't work. You always die. The loop always restarts. I always have to watch you grow up and die again. It's torture for me, but I can't imagine what it's like for you. It's going to be dangerous, and worse, it might not work, but it's not like either of us have a lot to lose. Either way, any fate is better than watching you do this again. You'll have to be smart. You'll have to be quiet. Above all, you'll have to be brave. If you think you can do that for me, then please, follow my advice. All you need to do is ignore the previous passage. It was just a joke, a cruel joke to be sure, but a joke nonetheless. Ha 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 ha. Humorous, is it not? However, you may go about your daily activities normally. Do not act abnormally. There is no such thing as a time loop.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
One of history's most famous relics is actually a warning, but it might be too late to translate the message, by Beifel's disciple. I shifted my attention away from the ancient copy of Walden in my lap and tried to focus on what he was saying. That's Dash. I looked down at Walden sitting on the couch where I'd left it. That's a vicious half-truth. Which half? Jim pressed. Are you going to tell me that you're not at home alone, reading Thoreau and sipping scotch? No, I snapped. Bourbon, then? He asked confidently. I stared abashedly at the half-empty bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. Yes. I paused again. Look, is there something you want to tell me? You know it's taking a clandestine tour of New England, right? Jim wheezed. The speed of our walk was much harder on him than it was on me. They don't announce when it's moving, and very few people even know that it's left the British Museum. Anyway, it's Brown's turn next week, and voila, the idiots showed up on our doorstep early with no announcement and even less fanfare. Idiots? I asked incredulously. His eyes seemed to sink into his skull. You're not understanding, he explained in a low tone. The cool night air ruffled his receding hairline, but he remained frozen in place. It split down the middle. I wanted to cry. Does it matter? The Rosetta Stone is one of the most significant pieces. Dash. Oh, Francis, Jim continued as he ran a hand through his graying hair, you have no idea. We had been enjoying the wonderful 48 hours between terrible New England winter and awful New England summer. But when I stepped down those stairs, a chill crept under my tweed blazer, latched onto my skin, and took up residence there for the duration of my time underground. A lifetime of academia had instilled in me a near-holy reverence of certain objects. I'd almost drooled over a Gutenberg Bible in the Huntington Library outside Los Angeles, and had spent 30 minutes frozen in place when I saw the Book of Kells as an undergrad living in Dublin. Witnessing the Rosetta Stone would have been a spiritual experience if it were not for the horror of its condition. Professor Francis Nelson? The pale woman asked sharply. I nodded in a daze. You can read fluent ancient Egyptian, both hieroglyphic and demotic scripts, in addition to ancient Greek, correct? I nodded, then shook my head. It's already been translated, nearly 2 centuries ago. You don't need me to dash. What's inside what? I responded in confusion. Do you understand it? The pale woman continued. That's Dash. Slack-jawed, I stared back down and began to read the message that could not possibly have been there. I read. I understood. I struggled to breathe. I snapped my head to the pale woman, then to the man in the corner, then back to Jim.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
I'm a 911 operator. Today I received a call that will haunt me forever. This is the transcript, by Dirtman77-8. Caller, hello. Yes, I'm in a plane and, static, caller cuts out. Operator, hello ma'am, what was that? Did you say you're on a plane? Caller, barely discernible, yes I'm on a plane, sobbing, I don't know what's happening, caller begins to cry. Caller, yes a flight, I was going from Texas to, static. Operator, it's okay ma'am, what happened when you tried to go to sleep ma'am? Caller, through tears, the plane is completely empty. Operator, empty. Operator, it's okay ma'am I'm sure your son is fine, the plane is completely empty. And you're still in the air. Caller, it's completely stationary in the air, breaks down crying again, the plane isn't moving but it's in the air, oh God what's happening to me, sobbing, am I gonna die? Operator, ma'am everything will be fine I just need you to listen to my voice and do as I say is that okay? Caller, sniffs, yes I think I can do that. Caller, okay I'm standing in the aisle now. Operator, good now make your way to the front of the plane and I want you to locate the pilot at the controls can you do that? Caller, yes okay I'm right next to there, I'm making my way there, what's your name? Caller, knocking sound, hello. Mr. Pilot are you there? There is a loud bang and something falling over, then silence. Operator, Enid. Caller, silence. Operator, Enid. Caller, whispering and sobbing, oh God, I ran, static, I'm hiding behind a row of chairs I think, static, I think there's something in here with me. Caller, oh God it's here, there is screaming amidst static, loud noises of something that sounds like bones snapping in two, and then the feed cuts. End of transcript.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what Stern made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.